Hi guys, my name is Sierra Hillsman and I'm a licensed professional counselor and the founder of Legacy Speaks, an organization dedicated to mental health awareness and advocacy and creating healthy conversations around mental wellness. And today we're going to be talking about anxiety. So, what is anxiety? There are a number of different forms of anxiety disorders, whether it's separation anxiety, social anxiety, agoraphobia, all of those things. But for the sake of today, we're going to talk about generalized anxiety, okay? But before we dive right in, I do want to provide clarification on a couple of things. That way we can, tie it in all together towards the end. So we understand that anxiety is the fear of the future, or maybe even the anticipation of a particular outcome that may or may not happen. Now, the key word there is fear, and we understand that fear is an emotional response in relation to a particular threat or a set of circumstances or experiences. So when a person is typically dealing with anxiety, we find that there are some shifts within their thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. And usually what this looks like is this increased vigilance in preparation for any potential threats in the future, and then also the manifestation of maybe even cautious or avoidant behaviors as well. Anxiety can develop in our childhood, and like most mental health disorders, if left untreated, it can become worse over time. Let's take a moment to dive into the different types of signs and symptoms in relation to anxiety. So the first one being restlessness, like high energy, always on the move, the inability to be able to kind of slow down, but constantly on edge. The next one being the impact on sleep. So the inability to fall asleep or stay asleep, always being awake because you're dealing with these racing thoughts. The next one being irritability. So the shift in the mood, always being on edge, causes the individual to not necessarily deal with some level of aggression, but maybe even frustration and mood swings. The next one being easily fatigued. You find yourself always on edge, not getting sleep, constantly being tired would be the result of that. So being mindful of how that impacts your overall wellness as well. Other signs and symptoms that people tend to overlook, possibly because of the fact that they may not be able to notice it in the moment, would include muscle tension. So meaning there's stress in the shoulders, or maybe even cramps in their calves, whatever the case may be. Those are just, typical areas that a lot of people might mention, but, kind of do a quick body scan to notice how anxiety is impacting you. And then the next one would be the inability to concentrate on the task at hand because their thoughts are being consumed by the worry. So not being able to fully focus, not being able to direct one's thoughts to what they need to do in that very moment. I'm pretty sure you probably experienced some additional signs and symptoms specific for you, but these are the general criteria in relation to the DSM-5, which is our diagnostic and statistical manual that a lot of people use in the mental health field. But I want you to know that in order for it to be considered clinical generalized anxiety, an individual has to display 3 or more of these symptoms for a period of time, specifically about 6 months. And like I mentioned, it really just depends on the context and the cultural aspects of the anxiety that's being experienced, because there are some circumstances where that fear may be warranted. The issue or the thing that we need to be mindful of is to what degree is it impacting our overall functionality and our well-being? To what degree is it keeping us from being able to effectively maneuver in our day-to-day living and to be able to complete our activities of daily living? What I really need you to ask yourself is, to what degree is my anxiety impacting my ability to work and to carry out my tasks, my ability to be able to show up in my relationships, my ability to be able to take care of my children, or maybe even the individuals that I'm a guardian over? So to what degree is my anxiety impacting my overall wellness and my overall ability to be able to function in my day-to-day norms? And after you ask yourself that, take a moment to extend it even further and ask yourself, how does anxiety actually show up for me? And what do I need in this moment to be able to work through that anxiety? And the reason why I say work through is kind of like what I mentioned before. Any unaddressed emotion that we deal with, it can manifest in other ways, and it can also impact us in the future, in the long run. So remember that healing is a process. What you don't tend to now will later become a problem even further. All right, now that we've got all the explanations out the way, let's get to the nitty-gritty. I'm pretty sure you're like, Sierra, thank you for breaking it down, but let's get to the secret sauce. How do we navigate anxiety? I got y'all. So first things first, let's get to the source of our anxiety monster, which would be our thoughts, right? So what are the things that you're thinking on a consistent basis that would be fueling those particular feelings in relation to anxiety? Once you create an active inventory of those thoughts by maybe journaling or even jotting them down on a piece of paper, look at the quality of the thoughts as well as the quantity of the thoughts, and maybe even the duration of the thoughts and how often those things are circulating within your mind. Reason being is kind of like what we talked about in terms of like the inability to focus. The reason why you're probably dealing with the inability to focus is because you're ruminating and obsessing over the things that you're thinking about. It's driving your focus into areas that it should not be in. Now, I need you to put your thoughts on trial. Check the validity of your thoughts. What's the likelihood of this thing happening? What's the likelihood of it not happening? What's the likelihood of this impacting you? What's the likelihood of it impacting the things that you love and the things that you care about? And the reason why I'm driving it home on the thoughts is because we deal with a number of cognitive distortions or maladaptive ways of thinking. So for example, catastrophizing, the belief that something will happen to the extreme of the extreme. And if we find ourselves constantly honing in on the worst of a situation, that creates feelings of helplessness, maybe even hopelessness or despair or disappointment, even before the actual thing actually takes place. After we create a thought journal and we bring these thoughts into our conscious awareness, we can begin to start utilizing other tools and measures like thought stopping. There's this thing that I like to utilize with my clients called catch it, check it, change it. And so when we find those particular thoughts trying to squeeze their way and bombard their way into the forefront of our mind, we have to catch that thing. Then once again, we check the validity of it, we check the circumstances of it, we check the overall impact of it, and then we decide where to compartmentalize it. Is it something that needs to be eliminated and diminished, or is it something that we actually need to take the time to entertain? Because there are some circumstances where we do need to take care of it, right? So for example, if you have a bill that's coming up, that's something that you need to be mindful of. Or maybe if you have a very important appointment, that's something that you need to be considering and tend to. So I'm not saying throw every single thought out the window, but take your time to learn which ones require your attention and which ones needs to just, be thrown in the trash can or even put into your back pocket. And then after that, simply changing it. And I know it sounds easier said than done, but I do want you to exercise the power of choice. I am empowering you to utilize your power of choice. You have the full autonomy and the full independence to make sure that you are utilizing your true authority to alter your thoughts. Think about something that could be like an affirmation or maybe even an excerpt or a quote, something that resonates with you, or maybe even positive feedback that you've received from a coworker, a friend, or maybe even loved one. So make sure that you are challenging those negative thoughts with something more positive. There's actually even a ratio 1 to 5. For every negative thought, we are replacing it with 5 positives. And so over time, you are building that muscle. You're learning to take the driver's seat and shifting it. You are in the driver's seat. You are the expert of your experiences. So I'm making sure that you're building your confidence to be able to challenge those thoughts in the here and now. Another thing to consider when it comes to challenging anxiety is to create that mind-body relationship. And the reason why that's so important is because a lot of people forget the fact that our mind impacts the body and our body impacts the mind. One is not more important than the other. They are heavily integrated, and we have to look at ourselves from a holistic perspective. Going back to that symptom of muscle tension, making sure we are mindful of where anxiety shows up in the body and tending to it in that manner. Another thing that we can do is utilize things like maybe yoga, deep breathing. Deep breathing is very cool because you inhale for 5 seconds and then you exhale for maybe about 7 or 8. Please be mindful, don't get woozy, all right? Don't get woozy, all right? So do what works best for you, but that's typically what you do. You inhale and then you exhale a lot longer. That way you're exerting all of that energy outside of yourself. Maybe even taking time out of your day to do a quick jog or run, or maybe if you need something low impact, taking a walk around the block as well. And as you are walking, pay attention to your pace, pay attention to your heart rate, pay attention to whether or not everything in your body is either increasing or decreasing. thing. All this goes back to mindfulness, right? So the more aware that we are of a thing, the better we have a chance to be able to tackle and work through it. Another intervention that I enjoy doing with clients would be the progressive muscle relaxation technique. And if you Google it, feel free to partner it with like sound bath music or maybe even meditation music. But essentially the premise of it is to go from head to toe, each section of the body, tensing it up to the tightest of the tightest without straining, and then releasing it very slowly. So you'll move from your head to your shoulders and neck, to your chest, to your stomach, then your thighs, then your calves, and your feet, and so on. And then you do the entire body. And the whole purpose of that is so that you're able to notice the difference between when your body is dealing with extreme stress versus when your body is in full relaxation. Oftentimes what I find is that people are so used to tension and stress in the body that they've forgotten what relaxation actually feels like. And so my question to you is, how are you creating space for relaxation to exist, not only in your life, but in your physical body and in your soul? That was deep, huh? Yes! If you already haven't done so, I need you to start creating a toolbox for resiliency. And what this looks like is a number of activities and hobbies that you can engage in to help you manage the stress of anxiety. So we can also create like a playlist of songs that we enjoy that we can tap into, or maybe even finding a local coffee shop or restaurant that you can just slip into during times of stress, or having that friend on speed dial when you are experiencing maybe like a panic attack, or you're not able to really focus at that time at hand. Another thing too about focusing in the moment, grounding techniques, tapping into your five senses. What do you see, taste, touch, smell, or feel physically in this very moment? And what you need to do is literally a 5 for 5. Find 5 things in the room that you're in relation to those 5 senses. Now, if you're watching this and you personally don't struggle with anxiety, cool, but these are some tips and tricks that you can share with other individuals. There are a number of ways to support your friends and loved ones, or maybe even your co-workers who are dealing with anxiety. Continue to provide some level of emotional support, whether it's being a listening ear or just providing your presence, maybe even giving them a hug with consent, y'all. Please don't just be touching random people. But also like finding ways to just be there for them, okay? And then you also have instrumental support, whether it's doing them a favor, like getting them a cup of water, or maybe even getting them to the nearest chair, bringing their chair to them. You know, what are some things that you can do to support that individual in that moment? And sometimes support even looks like reiterating the importance of finding a mental health professional to help them navigate through those times, because the last thing we want is for them to turn towards maladaptive coping mechanisms. And what this looks like is denial or avoidance, or maybe even utilizing substances in order to self-medicate to be able to overcome that anxiety. So finding things that will help them work through it rather than masking it. All right, y'all, I know that this was a lot of information, but I truly do hope that this has helped you in some way, shape, form, or fashion. Feel free to stay connected with me via legacyspks.com, where I have some additional resources, and you can also reach out to me via social media at legacyspks on everything. Once again, my name is Sierra Hillsman, and I'm a licensed professional counselor and the founder of Legacy Speaks, and I look forward to helping you in this journey. Thank you so much.